Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Father Talks podcast. I am here with Mr. Kent Darcie. Kent, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you, Michael.
Hey, it is a privilege. So, Kent, we were just talking offline, and we're going to get into this first because I want to make sure that we do not forget about it. So, Kent is the author of two books, and I think they're very pertinent to the conversation we're going to have today. So, Kent, tell us about the books before we get into anything.
Sure. They are written for adults with divorced parents. The first one's called Choose a Better Path, Overcoming the Impact of Your Parents' Divorce. And basically, it's just a user-friendly devotional that kind of
Okay.
walks us through the various issues that affect us, those of us who have divorced parents, because we don't realize what's going on, how it kind of reprograms our brain. And the other book, just came out this year actually, is called Preparing to Say I Do When Parents Said I Don't. It's a premarital guide for adults with divorced parents because I'm
Okay.
a licensed professional counselor. And from time to time, I run across people that are, going to premarital counseling and they're learning how to, have a solid marriage and all this. And I'll say, well, did they ask you about this? No. Did they ask you about this? No, because I'll divorce parents, and that really complicates the waters. So basically, I wrote that book to come alongside traditional premarital counseling materials.
Gotcha. Okay. So also, I was looking, and you are the founder of Adults with Divorced Parents Ministries, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about that. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it came about because my parents divorced when I was 12, 13. And if you had said, Kent, is it affecting you in any way? I would have said no. I mean, it's, the holidays are a hassle and all that.
Yeah.
But basically, I'd say I was good. I was fine. And probably 20 years later, I was at a marriage retreat weekend, and a person of faith in the Lord said, basically, Ken, if you don't get your act together, you're on the same emotional path as your dad. And at that point, my dad had divorced twice, was heading towards his third marriage. He was an adult child of divorce, from an adult child of divorce, from an adult child of divorce, which is very common.
Right.
And that scared the bejeebers out of me because I love my wife and I didn't
Right.
want a divorce, And I'm basically a researcher at heart. And the Lord led me to a book called The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce, which introduced me to two really important, pivotal things. And one was that there was millions of me out there, those of us with divorced parents. And the
Right.
second thing, despite my vehement denials, my parents' divorce was still impacting me. So I continued to do research. I interviewed social workers and authors and counselors and adults with divorced parents. I was serving on the deacon board at the time at my church and said, hey, we need to let people know about this. So they said, go for it. I did my first all-day seminar back in 2004, and basically the ministry was born.
Outstanding. So, and how long have you been doing the ministry?
Over 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, over 20 years. It's which seems kind of crazy, but
Yeah. No. Hey,
you know,
listen. But when you're doing something you love, you never work a day in your life.
yeah, it's also one thing I forgot to mention is, and this is super important. Um, if you're listening today, well, you are listening, but if you're listening and you're divorced, a friend of yours is divorced, your parents are divorced or whatever, it is a key part of our ministry that we are not here bashing divorced people. We are not just honoring parents. Basically, the position of my ministry is that the divorce happened. What's the impact on the kids when they grow up? And how do we overcome that impact? And one other thing, since I started 20 years ago,
Right.
probably the last 10 years-ish, particularly the last 10, 15 years, a second segment of this divorce issue has come up, and that's called gray divorce. And that is where parents are waiting until the kids are grown to get divorced. 25, 35, 45, 52
Right.
years and calling it quits. And that opens a whole another can of worms. That's also another part of what we're doing these days.
Yeah. And see, now I've met a lot of people who stayed together for their kids, and I know kids, people my age who talk about, their parents being together, and you could just tell that they were just going through the motions. I think it's a terrible idea to get together for your kids, because your kids see the turmoil in the relationship. They see the disconnect, and fortunately for me, my parents are, they're still together. They've gone through, there was a point in time where they were talking about divorce, but they
Uh-huh.
found a way through counseling or whatever it was that they did, to make it work. So I'm happy for them. But talking
And
with
that's the key.
yeah,
That really is the key what your parents did.
yeah, and trust me when I tell you, I mean, my parents were like on the cusp of like, hey, you know what, kids are pretty much, you guys are all grown up,
Uh-huh.
no more of this. And you know what? They've found a way to make it work, and I'm happy for them. They
Yeah.
seem, and honestly, they seem happier now than any time I can think of throughout their marriage.
And I hope people hear that message because I agree. Again, I've been doing this and I'm definitely I'm not anti-divorce. I mean, there's
Yeah,
situations where it just is not healthy or whatever to be in, in this but um most couples are not doing what your parents did. Should we just stay together for the kids? Absolutely not. No, you don't just stay together for the kids. What you do is you go to all the amazing helps that are out there. You get good resources. You learn how to do it right. You listen to shows like you did just recently on how can we better serve our wife and how can we do whatever. I
yeah,
mean, that's what you do and you make it work. And
yeah,
what I usually say is if people would spend just if they would just spend half of the energy they're going to spend on the new relationship with the relationship they have now,
uh-huh,
things would change. Because you are not going to just sit on the couch and do whatever. You're not going to be wandering around in your slippers and whatever with this new person. You're going to look good, even though you've got kids and you're busy. You will look
yes,
good for that date, and you will not be whatever. You're going to, do whatever. And if you would just spend half of that effort on the relationship you have now, it would change.
yeah,
You know,
and I find that a lot of people, after they've been together for so long, and I've been in the same situation, that we get stuck in a rut. We don't know how to we don't know how to communicate anymore. We let frustrations get in the way of, of talking. You know, we okay, I've been asking my wife to do such and such for months. She just refuses to do it, so I'm just not even gonna bother no more. But that's the wrong answer because we start shutting ourselves off, to our significant other. We stop making the effort because maybe, I don't know, you wanted your wife to do whatever XYZ, but by shutting yourself off to asking things in the future only makes things worse.
yeah. Yeah, it
So,
doesn't go away.
yeah,
And contrary to popular opinion and why we're here today is it does affect the kids.
yes,
It absolutely does. When now we're adult children of divorce ministries, adults with divorced parents, because there's
yes,
plenty of resources out there for kids that were not there when I was, going through my parents' divorce. Now I mean, the counselors are on board, the youth pastors on board. They know that this is not just, a bump in the road and it's a big deal. So there's lots of resources for the kids, but for
yeah,
adults, and particularly the issues that affect adults with divorced parents are particularly problematic for men because some of the major issues that impact us when my parents divorced when I was 12, 13, the number one issue is
oh,
anger.
yes,
And that's males and females, but we're talking a predominantly male audience. And anger is a big issue. And we're
right,
angry because there's loss, there's blame, our world changes. For the most part, when we're kids, the world revolves around us. I mean, right or wrong, that's a separate question, separate program. But,
right,
you know, but the reality of it is, and we go from a kid centric model to a parent centric model. It is now
mhm,
based on their timetables, their needs, their whatever. And then you got two different orbits you're dealing with. And we get angry because sometimes we could play sports. Now we can't anymore because we're missing half the practices. We
exactly,
lose some of our friends. We lose so and what happens is if we don't deal with this anger in childhood like I didn't, we drag it into our adulthood
right,
and that can be very, very problematic.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's like when you have a bad relationship. You have a bad relationship with this person, but you bring the drama from that bad relationship into the new relationship, and you've already set it up to fail because you can't let the old stuff go.
Well, yeah, and the anger thing is now and we'll just detour here for a second because anger when we look at anger, we tend to look externally. It's our wife, it's our girlfriend, it's our boss, it's politics, it's our sports team, it's whatever, it's out there. In reality, anger is inside. And there's an exercise that Tom and Beverly Rogers came up with called the gift exercise. It's basically a summary of all the data that's out there, but it's called the gift exercise. And when we feel upset, angry, whatever, we want to ask the question, the gift, G, guilt. Are we feeling guilty? Are we feeling inadequate or inferior? I. Are we feeling fearful? F. Is there some sort of trauma or trigger in our background? T. So when we are upset and something does get us riled up, we want to go internal and go, am I feeling guilty right now? Well, what does that look like? Well, basically, dog gets into the garbage and you come out there, well, how'd this happen? And, well, am I the only one who does garbage around here? Well, the reality of it is she asked you to do the garbage an hour ago and you forgot.
Yeah.
So that's guilt. Now,
Yeah.
if you track these over time, gift, GIFT, guys will tend to land on I. We hate feeling inadequate. We hate feeling inferior. And that what we see is the anger, but we don't drill down to see what's triggering that anger. And very often it is that feeling of inadequacy or inferiority, which very often divorce can accentuate. Because what happens is, like, for instance, my dad was gone. I went from seeing him every day. And I know a lot of people listening maybe didn't have a good relationship with their dad or their dad wasn't there. I had a great relationship with my dad. I mean, he was my God. He could jump tall buildings with a single bound, stop bullets with his teeth. I mean, he could do anything. I mean, and then I went from seeing him all the time to maybe 2 or 3 times a year for a couple hours. And that haul was huge. And it also happened at a time when I needed a model of what a dad does, how he comes alongside. So all this stuff was gone. And basically that feeds inadequacy. Because you're going through life not knowing this or not knowing that or not whatever, or feel like you don't. Because usually our thing is everybody else has it and we're the only ones that don't know. And the
Right.
reality is none of us know. We're all clueless. But we get into adulthood and we get into a relationship and we don't know. And we're dealing with a person from the opposite species of us. You have males and females, created male and female. And guess
Yeah.
what? Regardless of what they're saying, they're not the same. I mean, they have different paradigms, different things, different whatever. And when we acknowledge that, it works. And that's a whole other program as well, which you've already done. But, but from our standpoint, nobody can make us feel inadequate or inferior like our girlfriend or wife. And that's
Right.
not malicious or intentional. That's just the way relationships kind of go. Most women aren't doing intentional. I'm going to make this guy feel, they care. They're relational, we're logistical, and they want to just make sure things, but we feel inadequate. And then the other thing is I call it streaming, because the ladies' brains are more integrative, so they can process a lot of data in real time. I call it streaming. Guys don't stream. We're more like DVRs. I mean, data comes in, we kind of process it and we process it and we process it, and we're linear. And then we come out with a decision. So she asks us a question and we go, well, this is the answer. She's streaming. So then she hits us with 8 more questions with a bunch of drop-down menus. Our brain gets
Ooh.
overwhelmed.
Yes.
And then we either say something stupid, don't say anything at all, or we respond in anger. Guess why? Because we're feeling inadequate or
Right.
and inferior. So then the F is fear, where we're just afraid. That tends to be more ladies than guys. Like if you track the ladies over time, they will tend to land on the F because they're relational and they're concerned about how, what's affecting the relationship. Is everything okay? There's fear. They're nurturers. Okay. And then T is trauma. Some of these divorces are, who are you going to live with? Me or mom? That's traumatic. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. So whenever there's anger, we want to make sure we go through the gift exercise and go internal, and that can really help keep things from escalating.
Okay. So Kent, you said that you said that your parents divorced when you were 13, and you shared that you were in denial for years about the impact of it all. What finally made you realize like, hey, the divorce had really affected you?
Well, the big thing was, when I initially went through the unexpected legacy of divorce, that opened my eyes to just all sorts of ways. In fact, it's kind of interesting. And then, of course, doing the research and doing this for 20 years, I'm kind of healing myself in a lot of ways. Because, for instance, another issue we deal with is fears. We have a fear of abandonment, fear of conflict, fear of inadequacy, fear of marriage, fear of divorce. And I had a huge fear of abandonment. I also had a huge fear of doom.
Mhm.
And that's an interesting one. Because, and I read about it in the book. In fact, the unexpected legacy of divorce, one of the things that really struck me was she called it the best case scenario. And that was me. I didn't do drugs. I didn't go off the rails. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't go off the rails or any sort of stuff. But I had a huge fear of doom. And what that is basically going through life, waiting for the rug to get pulled out from under you at any moment. Because a lot of times, even if there was fighting, even if there was arguing, we never expect the divorce to happen at our house. Our neighbors, maybe, our friends, maybe, but not our house. And when
Right.
it comes, it catches us off guard, and we can go through life always waiting for the unexpected to happen. And what happens is that if you're from an intact family, like your parents, never divorced, you go through life and, the kids are behaving, your relationship with your wife is good or girlfriend, and, the job's okay, everything, your anxiety level goes down.
Right.
If you have a fear of doom, and the relationship's going with your wife, your girlfriend, the kids are behaving, the job's going good, and everything's going really great, get a raise, your anxiety level goes up, because if you're waiting for it to fail anyway, you now have more to lose. So,
Okay.
again, for those of us of faith, Jesus talked about abundant life, and I call that 0 to 10 life. 0 is really, really crummy, and 10 is really, really great. Well, I've found and learned and experienced and seen through the research that we tend to live, those of us with divorced parents tend to live between 4 and 7. We're not going to get too high because we're only going to be disappointed anyway. And we're not going to get too low, and particularly as men, because we feel like we're going to lose it, and we definitely don't want to go there. So we don't live that abundant life that we could be dealing with, because we're afraid to. And that was definitely me. That was textbook me.
Yeah. See. Wow. Eh,
It's a lot.
it's a lot to process.
Yeah,
But all right, let me follow it up with this. And
sure.
what would you say to fathers, to a father who believes, I don't know, about, my kid's tough, they'll get over all of this.
I believe that you're sincere in that belief. Um, but it just isn't true. The reality of it is that even under the best of circumstances, if you're dealing with a bell curve, and on the left side of the bell curve, you've got your chummy people, on the right side, you've got the neglect and all that. Even the chummy ones, you still got two houses. And right now, kind of the rule of the land is 50-50 overall. Back in my day, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, it was, it was usually the mom would get the kids. So half the time you're not with your dad. You're choosing sides. And that's assuming they don't remarry, which is most of the time new boyfriends, new girlfriends, whatever are coming onto the scene. And it is a very, very chaotic time. So it is absolutely going to affect the kids. They don't have a template of how to work things out. And the other issue that tends to happen with divorce, and there's a bunch of them, but another one that tends to happen with parental divorce, is there's no place to go with their emotions. Because what happens is, second only to the death of a spouse, from as far as emotional trauma is concerned, is a divorce. And in some ways, divorce is worse, because if a 45-year-old husband dies, that's a tragedy. He didn't plan on that. He didn't. But if a 45-year-old husband and father walks away, or the mom walks away, it's a tragedy. It's rejection. And the people going through divorce, it's hugely traumatic. And a lot of their bandwidth is tied up with themselves because they're going through this. So when the kid is acting up, and there's some really interesting research with ADHD diagnosis,
Okay.
that what'll happen is, again, we talked about how ladies and men are different. Guys are very hands-on, very action. We don't sit down. I mean, as kids or whatever. I mean, that's just how we're wired. We've got testosterone and we do. And ladies are more relational. They talk. And there's no right or wrong. It's just different. Well,
Right.
what'll happen, and what the research showed, which was fascinating, was they get divorced, and that in itself will trigger negative responses often.
Mhm.
The kids may regress. There's anger, there's confusion, and whatever. Well, if you put that on top of a boy who normally is active and whatever, that's not how she's wired. She's wired that girls sit down and they talk. Girls will sit down and read. I'm not saying all girls, they don't do active. I'm just saying, as a rule, guys are, let's get out there, let's do whatever. Boys are, run and do whatever. Well, guess what? When you put anger on top of that and confusion, they're even more active. And they take him to the doctor and go, he never sits down, he never does this, he never was, and they stick him with Ritalin. So we've got guys out there that start, and I'm not saying there isn't ADHD, I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply saying that in this context, sometimes what'll happen is we're diagnosing boys who are active and angry and confused because of a divorce with ADHD, when in reality, we're not asking the questions of what's going on in their home right now. Well, yeah, they do have my dad, his dad and I are yelling all the time, and I keep telling him how lousy guys are. And, well, yeah, I know I always complain that, the checks don't show up on time, and I'm always telling him he's just like his dad. And we're wondering why the kid's acting up and wetting his bed and acting up in school. He doesn't need pills. He needs to talk to somebody.
Right.
So
But
all that to answer your question is it is absolutely going to affect the kids. And I will take it another step because you had mentioned how your parents have been married for quite a while.
yes.
Gray divorce is now a huge issue. Parents are walking away from the marriage after 25, 35, 40, 45. I was at a conference with 52 years. They had just found out
Really?
their parents were divorcing after 52 years. And basically what's happening out there is, basically what's happening is they're saying, well, you know what? I've got 30 years left. I'm not going to live with this bum or this witch, and I'm going to be happy for my last 30 years. But a part of that is the kids are grown and it won't affect them. And that
Right.
is absolutely not true. In fact, in many ways, it's worse.
I was gonna say, I think it might be worse
It
to
actually is.
because 30, 40 years of your parents being together, it's all you know.
That's right.
At least at a younger age, getting if you get help, you get, you can get counseling, things like that. You've got time to adjust. But when your parents divorce after 40 years, you know, like that is a huge smack in the face.
Yeah, it opens up a whole can of worms. And one of the well, there's a bunch of problems, but one of the big ones is along the lines of what you're talking about. There's no support.
Yes.
If you're at work and you get a call and you get off the call and your coworker comes to you and go, what's the matter? And you go, I just got off the phone with my mom and my parents are getting divorced. I mean, we just celebrated the 35th anniversary 2 years ago. The
Right.
answer you're going to get is, well, what's the big deal? You're grown now. Or don't you want them to be happy? And the reality of it is now, before you took your kids to grandpa and grandma's house, now you're taking your kids to grandpa or grandma's house. And you got to explain it to your kids when you can't even understand it.
Right.
The
And
other, yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, just trying to process that, you know, especially later on in life, once you have your own kids, trying to divide up time for both of your parents is what I imagine would be a nightmare.
And what about if the new boyfriend comes on?
Right.
Do you really want the kids to meet grandpa's new girlfriend or grandma's new boyfriend when maybe they'll only be around 6 months? How do you tread those waters? Excuse me. And the other issue you deal with gray divorce is I call TMI, too much information, because the parents will treat the kids as adults
Hmm.
and they're still their kids. I mean, we've got three grown kids and we still call them our kids.
Right.
I mean, they'll be our kids forever, but I don't want to hear that you've been, unsatisfied all these years. I mean, la, 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 la. I don't want to hear this. I mean, I'm your
Oh my
kids. I
God.
mean, and we deal with the loyalty challenge, whether your parents divorced as a kid or when we were adults. When we're an adult, it's trickier because the loyalty challenge is basically which one do you love me more, me or dad, me or mom? Okay. And sometimes it's explicitly said when we're kids, or sometimes it's kind of caught or it's implied. But as an adult, it takes it to another level because basically what they're saying is you're old enough to understand why your dad is a this or your mom is a that. So how can you possibly side with them? And now you're caught in between these two. And it's just a nightmare. And it also creates doubt because there's this sort of thing that, you know what, if mom can put up with that all these years, if dad can put up with that all these years and they can make it, then you know what, we'll make it through. But when it collapses I just had one, I was at a conference and somebody walked up and they'd found out, I think 2 months earlier, that their parents were divorcing after 41 years. And what happens is we get now, well, if they couldn't make it after all that time, how on earth are we going to make it with all our problems?
Right.
And now doubt comes in and that's super problematic. And then again, for those of us of faith, it distorts our view of God. I mean, if God couldn't prevent dad from running off with whoever or mom doing whatever and all that, and they went to church, then how does that work? We'll hear scriptures like honor your father and your mother. And we're sitting in church looking at the person to our right or looking at the person to our left going, well, that may be true for you and may be true for you, but honor my mother, honor my father. Are you kidding me? And we start to cherry pick which scriptures are true and which ones aren't. And the big thing of all this is in most cases, we don't realize this is going on under our brain. It's all kind of under the radar. It's affecting our behavior, but we're not aware that this is happening. And that's why I so appreciate, Michael, this opportunity to get this information out there because men are hearing this and there's men that are going, you know what? That's me.
Right.
That's me. When she comes home late, I am in total freak mode wondering, is she out with somebody? Is she whatever? And she's just hung up at work. In our world, conflict equals divorce. Now, that's not true, but in our world, it was. So if there's conflict in our relationship, we will avoid it like the plague because guess what? I don't want to get divorced And in a lot of cases, we feel inadequate and able to even be able to communicate through a conversation. So you have fear of inadequacy, you have fear of divorce, you have fear of abandonment, and what do you get? Anger.
See, and I see I and again, just for the purposes of the show, I know a lot of guys who have stayed in relationships 20 plus years with somebody, and I don't I don't know all the details, so I can be honest and upfront about that. But they stayed in relationships because they didn't want to get divorced like their parents did. They
Yeah.
remember how it affected them. But
Hmm.
at the same time, you're in a relationship where the two of you are constantly arguing, you're being disrespectful to each other in front of your kids, and you're essentially teaching your kids that, hey, no matter how somebody treats you, you stay with them because, you stay with them.
And that's wrong. That's a bad message to send out. The better message is what your parents did. You find resources that can help you understand, first of all, what makes her tick. There's a
Yes.
couple of really great books out there. There's one called For Men Only and For Women Only. It's by Shanti and Jeff Feldhahn. If you Google it, it'll come right up. They're the best books I've seen out there right now. They're little books too, and they're audiobooks, guys, too. you
Hey,
know,
look, I love an audiobook, man.
yeah.
Before I go crazy, but I will tell anybody, I will listen to an audiobook in a second. Why? Because I can still keep doing the things that I need to do throughout the day
Hmm.
and absorb the book. If I'm in the
Yes.
car,
Yeah.
I could pop it in real quick, you know, and
Yeah.
I can listen to it. So
Yeah.
I love the audiobook.
They're fantastic. But those books are the best, and I'm a licensed professional counselor as well.
Yeah.
Those are the best books I've seen out there. For Men Only basically tells you what makes women tick.
Okay.
Why do they react? Why is she always so, what's going on out there? And it's an easy to read book, easy to listen to book, and it gives you really amazing insight into what makes women tick. And for Women
Right.
Only, basically helps the ladies learn what makes men tick. Because the
Okay.
big difference is most guys, if they're honest, we don't have a clue what makes women tick. I mean, I've been married 40 some years and she's amazing and God's gift and grace beyond words, but she still confuses me after all these years.
Right.
But most women think they've got us pegged. And the author Shanti Feldhahn said, "No, I had no idea it was making what makes men tick." And she wrote those books. And what I find is, and if you're listening, well, you are listening. For Men Only will help you understand your wife or your girlfriend. But I
Right.
also encourage you to get For Women Only, because when I deal with a couple and I get those books, I'll have them do the initial books. Initially, he reads For Men Only, she reads For Women Only. But then I have them switch, because basically what we
Okay.
have, and particularly for men, For Women Only talks about what makes men tick. And what I find is when men go through that book, they go, wait a minute. Yeah, that's me. We're not really great always at verbalizing what our needs are or what makes us tick, but this book brings it to the forefront. And it's like, yes, that's really important to me. Yes, that's speaking my language. That's exactly how I feel. And I find that when they read For Women Only, they learn about themselves and what really makes them tick and what their needs really are. So you not only find out what her needs are, but you find out what your needs are, and you're learning how to communicate those needs in an effective way.
Right. So, all right,
Yep, I'm here.
putting the fiber optic lines in. So I apologize for that
Not a problem.
brief drop.
Editing is a wonderful thing.
So, all right. So, Ken, let me ask you another question. 'Cause I was looking through your profile and everything, and one of your episode ideas, right? It says, "Could your anger problem be related to your parents' divorce?" Now, how does unresolved divorce pain turn into anger later in life?
Interesting question. I would probably tweak that
Okay.
and say, what is the anger issues that occurred at the time of the divorce that we dragged into later life?
Okay. Okay.
Because I find that, and the research shows that a lot of the things that trigger the anger happen as a result of the divorce. I mean, it just is, it's just kind of it reprograms our brain. And, and again, we talked about fears. We didn't talk about mistrust, which also triggers anger. We don't trust people. People with divorced parents, we just don't trust. And we're angry and we're agitated. And what'll happen is we'll poke somebody with a stick, poke them 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 with a stick. And then eventually they get tired of getting poked with a stick and they leave and say, see, I told you we couldn't trust them. You know, so we start, and that happens at a very young age, because basically what happens is the two people that we are supposed to be able to trust. And again, we're looking at it through a kid's brain. We
Hmm.
find that we can't. Parenting means my needs are always met. It means that I need get what I need. It means that I'm the focus. It means that I'm special. It means that I'm loved. And very often with the divorce, either in reality or perceived, those things can change. And we feel that we aren't getting that. And so as a result, we can't and you also have good meaning parents will say, well, it's not going to change my love for you. It's not going to change anything. I mean, the divorce will, yeah, it will be separate, but it's not going to really change anything. And they're not malicious. They're not, trying to lead. They honestly believe that. But what
Yeah,
happens is the reality often is very different. And what we come to this conclusion is that we can't trust. And that can also make us angry. So a lot of the things that trigger anger, the fears, the mistrust, just anger in general because of loss and the loyalty challenge can make us angry and blame. We usually almost always blame one of them. Can make us angry. And a lot of that anger is stewed and created in childhood. But because we don't address it, we drag it into adulthood where basically life throws gas on the fire.
you're right. So, and I'm thinking about how when people, and this not necessarily even when you're going through a divorce, it could be a breakup. So many people put their personal issues before the pri they stop making the child the priority. When we're together, our kid is the most important thing, but now that we're splitting up, we're getting divorced, break up, whatever you have you, we stop prioritizing the kids, their health, yeah, and I don't say that we're not prioritizing their health, but it's their mental health that a lot of times we forget about, so we're
Yeah,
kind of
we get
yeah,
distracted from it
yeah,
because
and
we're going through a traumatic, crazy time, and so I always say, like we said up front, I mean, I don't bash divorced people. One of the things with my ministry is when you're dealing with adults with divorced parents, guess what? You're dealing with divorced parents too. So
right,
you get the emotional trauma, that goes with this, and unfortunately, it isn't that we forget to deal with our kids, just the bandwidth is tied up. We're distracted with all
right,
lawyer things and custody and learning this and all this stuff going on. And yeah, the mental health, the focus on the kids, as we had said earlier, we move from a kid-centric model to a parent-centric model.
right. So, all right, uh, let's talk about parenting time
Okay.
because that's always
Yeah.
a hot
Yeah.
issue. So, like, when a dad only gets certain days, weekends, or holidays, how can he make that time meaningful without trying to overcompensate? Because when me and my ex broke up, that was one of the things I know that I did a lot because I'm trying to fit everything in this in this little window of time.
Yeah. 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 That's one of the one of the pressures. First of all, you don't want to be a Santa Claus or a Disneyland dad. That doesn't work. And the
Right.
interesting thing is we think it does, but we lose in the long term because when the kids get grown, when the kids grow up and they look backwards, they see it. And
Yes.
they don't appreciate it, ironically enough. You would think they would love it, but when they look back on it, they don't. Maximizing the time that you have, part of that is trying to keep normalcy as much as possible. You're looking for normalcy in an abnormal situation. You've got them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every other weekend, and you pick them up on this Friday at 5, but you don't pick them up the next Friday at 5. The whole thing is crazy, and what you're going to try and do is create normalcy, not special stuff. Now, yes, you're going to do stuff like you would, but you want to kind of run a timetable like you would if you were still married. You don't do stuff all the time. The kids want you, not stuff. And then that gets interesting when they're teens because, when they're teens, they tend to start to move away and that's natural. And then we kind of get kind of pressure, particularly if they're girls, the daughters, then that's a whole other program too. But, yeah, but the reality of it is the best thing to do is just be normal and real, not perfect. And do co-parenting skills also. You never badmouth your spouse, your ex, never in front of the
Yeah.
kids or around the
That
kids.
that is something me and my wife have learned that, we make it a point to never talk about, our exes in front of our kids. And granted, our kids are older now, but throughout the time that we've been together, that was one of our major things. And I think that was because my wife witnessed how my ex would talk about me to my daughter, and it caused so many problems. And, she was just like, we are never going to do this. My stepson, we never talk bad about his dad. If we had to have a conversation, it was always in private, because we always wanted our kids to, if they were going to have an opinion of their other parent, it was not going to be based on something we said. Yeah,
Listen to what Michael's saying, everybody.
and, and I can tell you, listen, guys, I've been through the ringer where, I had an ex just badmouth me nonstop to the point where my kids were forming opinions that wasn't based on reality. It was just based on what, the other parent has said to them,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it is what it is at this
But you
point,
don't
we're
do tit for tat, though. That doesn't
never,
work. Whenever I
no.
have a couple, like I said, I'm a counselor, and from time to time, I'll have a client that's getting a divorce. And
Mhm.
I always, always, always encourage them to take the high road. You
Yes,
always take the high road because what'll happen is we try and win the battles and we lose the war. And the reality is like what you're describing is if we go tit for tat, if we, well, all this sort of stuff, what I have seen over and over and over again, the research shows, and again, I've been doing this over 20 years, is you may lose the battles or feel like you're losing the battles, but down the road, when those kids get older, they see the truth. Dad never badmouthed mom. Dad never whatever. He never whatever. And mom was constantly whatever. They will see the truth. So you will win the
right,
war, even if you feel like you're losing some of the battles now. Have a long-term goal. Go for the big plan to win the war, not the battles, because the battles are tough and they're brutal and it'll feel like you're losing the kids. But I'm telling you, if you take the high road, that you walk, follow the good co-parenting rules and be, the best that you can be, down the road when those kids are grown, maybe 20s, maybe 30s, the light bulb's going to go off and they will see it and you will have them for the remainder of that time. Whereas the person that was bad mouthing them, doing whatever, burning the bridges, they're the ones that lose the war.
right. Oh, people, guys, listen to that. I know it's hard.
It
It's,
is
and
very hard.
I have seen some, like, I try not to do too much social media, especially when I'm doing these shows, because I see so many horror stories. Like I just watched a video where a mom pulled her child out of their graduation because the dad was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And
so
we've talked about the
that,
bell curve. When I
yeah,
first started doing this, I was reading stuff and whatever, and I go, wow, that's crazy. That's really out there. And I found no, it's pretty close to the center of the bell curve. A lot of this stuff. I just again, I've been doing this for so long, you think that you think you've heard everything. And
right.
it's pretty rare when I go, huh. And I had a experience at a conference I did a few months ago where somebody told me, well, I was talking about the marriage book, and they said, oh, well, when you write the next book, because we're going to have a book coming up after this one, and they
Mhm.
said, call me up and let me know because they actually had two wedding rehearsal dinners because they couldn't have both parents in the same place.
Wow.
And that was a first for me. I've heard a lot of stuff, and I had never heard that before where they
That
literally
that's
two,
absolutely insane.
that's crazy,
Okay.
but there's a lot of craziness out there, but I offer hope because the reality of it is once we know what's going on and nobody's talking about this stuff. That's why I so appreciate opportunities like this because nobody is talking about this. Don't be in denial like I was for years. Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah.
No, I did that for decades and put my wife through a lot of craziness that I didn't need to. Learn how your parents' divorce is impacting you. Also, we're talking to a lot of people that the parents were never married.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
reality of it is you're dealing with serial divorce, if you will. When we're living here and then we're living there or whatever, that's just serial divorce. The impact is very similar. So learn what the impact is. Don't be in denial like I was, and then take action to change it. Learn how your parents' divorce impacted you. Learn how you can overcome those issues, and then learn how you can be a better husband, wife, spouse, father to your spouse and your kids.
Yeah. And Ken, on the show, we talk a lot about men and being able to communicate whatever issues they're having. So with that, what do you what do you say about men who are constantly, I'm good, when they're not? Why do men struggle so much to just admit, hey, that their parents' divorce had a profound effect on them and it's still affecting them?
Part of it is because of the culture. We
Okay.
have a culture out there that says it's no big deal. And the reality, because and again, that's why I always start these interviews with, you know what, we're not bashing divorced people. We're not, because parents don't want to think that what they did hurt their kids. They don't want to hear that. So we have this kind of denial sort of thing that it's not a big deal. It's, basically it's a bump in the road, all this sort of stuff. And the reality is that's just not true. It does infect us. So, part of it is that culture says it's no big deal. Well, guess what? It's a big deal. And the reality of it is, you just listening today, I can almost guarantee you've heard things today that you're going, yeah, That struck a little closer to home than I would like to. And you know what? If it didn't, then play this for your wife or your girlfriend or whatever, and I'm sure
Yeah.
she'll tell you, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. You know, and that's not a sign of weakness, my friend. That's a sign of strength because you want to break the cycle. I am so thankful. And again, I love my dad more than now, having gone through this process, than I did when I was really, really not a happy camper with him. Um, because the reality of it is that we can break the cycle. I am so thankful that I did not add another adult child of divorce to what, 2, 3 generations of them, that the Lord stepped in, got through a very thick skull that I have, and put me on a road that not only could I find healing, but he would have me start a ministry that could offer healing to others as well. So don't be like I was. This denial thing, it's all them. They no. In most, yeah, there's a couple out there that are whatever, but for the most part, we are just wounded and we don't know. We have to take a test and this and that and the other thing for a driver's license, and we'll give a marriage license for $49 at the city hall.
Yeah,
You
to
know,
just
and there's no training. Most of what we deal with is family of origin stuff, male, female stuff, and in this context, baggage that we've got from our parents' divorce. When we can deal with those issues, we can have that amazing, healthy, integrative relationship that we all desire, that not she becomes like me because she's not, or he becomes like her because he doesn't, but we respect the male and female that God created. One author put it really well. He calls guys blue and women pink. And he says, and when you put those two together, you get the color purple, which is the
right.
color of royalty, which is
Mm,
really what our desire is. And I love that.
me too. I like that. I like that a lot.
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking about what you said about your work is not about blaming, or bashing divorced parents. Explain to us why that distinction is so important.
Because it's such a sensitive area.
Right.
It is, when I wrote Choose a Better Path, one of the concerns I had was that divorced parents would think that we were trying to bash them. And what I learned, which has been really encouraging, is that some of my biggest fans of the book are divorced parents, because what they found was that they were able to read through the book. And again, it's not a hard read. It's basically a devotional. It just kind of covers the major issues that affect adults with divorced parents that we don't know. Nobody talks about this. Somebody don't know it. But what it did was it gave them a dialogue to talk with their kids, because we've been talking about how we move from a kid-centric mode to a parent-centric mode. And basically these parents they really care about their kids and they really want it not to hurt them, but they don't know how to do it. And what I found was this book has given them a vehicle for a dialogue. They're seeing it now through their kids' eyes. And they go, you know what? I read this and it talked about, like, one of the episodes in there, one of the things is called The First Kiss is Worse Than Third Shift. And basically it talks about the first time you see your parent kiss somebody else,
Yeah.
because it just doesn't compute. My dad remarried twice.
Mm,
And my stepmom, number 2 now, is an amazing woman, probably the most normal of the 3. And, she's awesome. But and they were married. He was married to my mom, almost 25 years, to my first stepmom, almost 25 years. And he passed just before 25 years with my second stepmom. And she's a wonderful woman, but it still wasn't normal for me to see him kissing her. It just doesn't compute, and there's that type of just weird stuff that we can bring to the table now in truth, pray through it, and get healing from it, and acknowledge it. So the divorced parents are reading that going, you know what? I never even thought of that.
right.
Because their attitude, particularly with gray divorces, aren't you happy that I found somebody that can make me happy? Excuse me. You want me to be happy that you have a boyfriend that, I
Yeah.
mean, and
Yeah.
they honestly
Yeah.
don't get it. They don't understand why they're not happy. We're not happy for them. And guess what? It's because we're grieving. You were miserable, but we had 2 parents and now we don't. And we are grieving. So,
Yes.
the biggest thing that I found was that this book was super helpful for divorced parents to give them a dialogue and understand why we grieve, why we don't get it, why we don't do whatever. And that helps a healthy dialogue between the parents and the kids, which is also really important in these situations.
All right. So Kent, real quick, let's revisit real quick. Get both of your books again, and where can we find them?
Sure. The first book is called Choose a Better Path, Overcoming the Impact of Your Parents' Divorce. And it's available on our website, hope4adp.com, for the number for ADP.com. The audiobook and the ebook, actually, they're all available on the website. The second book is called Preparing to Say I Do When Parents Said I Don't, a premarital guide for adults with divorced parents, because I found that premarital materials just don't cover it. And that's available on Amazon. Again, also as an audiobook, an ebook, and hardcover and softcover, actually.
Outstanding. All right. So, Kent, one more question before we close. Okay. For the fathers listening right now. Okay. What do you want fathers to understand about divorce, healing, and their children that most people are afraid to say out loud?
That even if you've done everything right, it still impacts the kids. And it's really important to face that in humility and through their eyes and not through your own. And that will bring tremendous healing, not only to yourself, but to the kids as well. It changes everything when we're all on the same page in this thing.
Right. Outstanding.
There's
All
also, I
right.
forgot to mention,
Okay.
hopeforadp.com. It has blogs and videos and podcasts. And I have a resource page that I like to say is not the Kent Darcie show. It's basically the best resources that are out there to help people who are dealing with their parents' divorce. Like we talked about gray divorce. There's a book out there
Yes.
called Home Will Never Be the Same Again. It's the best book, Friedenberg and Hughes. It's the best book out there on gray divorce. It's a secular book, but there's nothing weird in it or anything. But it's a great, great book. But whatever the resources are that are the best, that's what I have on the resource page. But lots and lots of helps out there on the website.
Outstanding. Kent, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I am going to continue following you, paying attention to the things you're doing. I think I may have some people I want to point in your direction. So uh, we'll see. Hopefully they can figure it out. But if not, we'll definitely send them your way.
Well, thank you, Michael. I so appreciate the opportunity to get this information out there because it's not a popular topic, but it
Right.
affects millions. Basically, half of everybody you know has divorced parents and don't understand the impact.
That is insane. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for us today. I'm Mike D. Mr. Kent Darcie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. And there we go.